The year 2014, Mountain View, California. A man stands outside a derelict, abandoned building. It used to be the North County Social Services office. This is where, years ago, he stood in line for food stamps. Now, he's holding a pen. He isn't signing for a handout. He's signing a deal worth $19 billion. Jan Koum just sold his app to Facebook. It was the largest acquisition of a venture-backed company in history. But to understand why Jan chose this specific building to sign the paperwork, we have to look at the silence. This is the story of the man who built a global empire by refusing to listen. Ukraine. 1976, the Soviet Union is a place of paranoia. In a small village outside Kiev, Jan Koum learns his first business lesson before he can even read: privacy is a luxury. His childhood wasn't a montage of technology, it was a struggle for survival. His school didn't even have an indoor toilet. In the winter, at -20 degrees, he had to walk across a frozen yard just to use the bathroom. But the cold wasn't the worst part. It was the ears. In the USSR, your phone was not a tool for connection, it was a government listening device. You didn't talk about politics. You didn't talk about dreams. You whispered. You learned that if you had something important to say, you said it in person or you didn't say it at all. At 16, the walls were closing in. Jan and his mother fled to California. They arrived with nothing but a suitcase full of notebooks and pens because school supplies were too expensive in America. They were the American dream in reverse. He swept floors at a grocery store, the dust filling his lungs as he watched people with real lives buy things he couldn't imagine. His mother stuffed her suitcases with school supplies to save every penny. They lived on the edge of oblivion, surviving on disability checks and the grace of social workers. Then, the darkness deepened. His mother was diagnosed with cancer. The woman who had sacrificed everything to get into a land of opportunity was fading away. Their only income was her disability check. Jan felt the weight of the world crushing him. He was a high school rebel. He didn't fit into the American system any better than he fit into the Soviet one. But in the back of a dusty bookstore, he found a manual on computer networking. He didn't buy it, he couldn't afford it. He borrowed it. He sat in the flickering light of a government-assisted apartment, decoding the language of the future while his mother slept in the next room. He wasn't just learning to code, he was learning how to build a world where no one could be silenced. Fast forward to 2009. Jan is 33 years old. He has spent years working at Yahoo, watching the internet turn into a giant billboard. He's tired. He's cynical. And he's just been rejected for a job at Facebook. Think about that. The man who would later force Mark Zuckerberg to write a $19 billion check was told he wasn't good enough to be an employee. He's unemployed. He's aimless. He's spending his days playing ultimate frisbee and wondering if he's missed his window. Then, he buys an iPhone. He realizes the App Store is about to explode. But he doesn't want to build a game. He doesn't want to build a social network. He envisions something simpler. An app that simply tells your friends your status. In the gym. Battery low. Can't talk. He names it WhatsApp. It sounds like what's up. Jan sits in a Red Rock cafe with his co-founder, Brian Acton. The air smells of burnt espresso and desperation. They are two guys who have been chewed up and spat out by the tech industry. They made a pact. A radical, almost insane philosophy for Silicon Valley: no ads. No games. No gimmicks. Ever. Advertising is the tax you pay for being unremarkable, Jan would say. He remembered the Soviet spies. He remembered the feeling of being watched. He didn't want your data. He didn't want to know your interests. He wanted your trust. Every other startup was obsessed with engagement metrics and ad revenue. Jan was obsessed with a clean interface. He wanted a message to send instantly, even on a bad connection, even in a third world country. He wanted it to be as reliable as a dial tone. He was burning through his savings. He was living on credit. He was betting everything on the idea that people valued their privacy more than they valued free apps. But there was a problem. A massive, bank account draining problem. The app wasn't working. WhatsApp was failing. It crashed constantly. It had no users. Jan's friends would download it, try it once, and delete it because it didn't do anything. Jan was watching his meager life savings vanish into the server costs. He was ready to give up. The ghost of the food stamp line was returning to haunt him. "I should just get a job, Brian," he said, staring at his computer screen. "This is over. We're chasing a ghost." But then, the universe shifted. Apple launched push notifications. Suddenly, when you changed your status, everyone's phone went ping. Jan realized something his users realized first: they weren't using it for statuses. They were using it to text each other for free. It wasn't a status app anymore. It had accidentally become a messenger. It was fast. It was free. And most importantly, it worked across borders. For an immigrant like Jan, this was huge. You could talk to your family in Ukraine without paying $2 a minute to a telecom giant. The growth was vertical. 10 million users. 100 million. 400 million. They had no marketing budget. They had no PR firm. They didn't even have a sign on their office door. But success brought the vultures. Governments began to realize they couldn't read the messages. WhatsApp had implemented end-to-end encryption. The ghost of the Soviet Union was back, but this time, Jan held the keys. Brazil banned the app. Security agencies hissed. The pressure was immense. Imagine being a billionaire on paper, but having the most powerful governments in the world trying to shut you down. Jan faced a choice: install a backdoor for the authorities and play the game, or risk his entire legacy to protect the privacy of people he would never meet. Jan sold to Facebook for $19 billion. He was now one of the richest men on earth. But the ghost of the Soviet Union never left him. Facebook wanted data. Facebook wanted ads. Jan wanted privacy. In 2018, Jan did the unthinkable. He walked away from Facebook. He left hundreds of millions of dollars in unvested stock on the table. Why? Because his integrity wasn't for sale. Jan Koum's story isn't about an app. It's about the power of no. No to ads. No to surveillance. No to the status quo. He started with a suitcase and a borrowed book. He ended by building a bridge for 2 billion people to speak in private. In a world that wants to track your every move, the greatest rebellion is simply being untraceable. Privacy is a human right.